Welcome back, and we're now going to talk about event listeners. Event listeners really allow us to add the type of interactivity that we need for a web page like this. Yes, we have a select menu up to this point where you can select it and we can console log out what we've seen, but we don't have a real way of deciding that we actually want to buy that item. We don't have a way we can push a button. We don't have a way to actually capture the price and the name of what we're adding to a cart. So event listeners help give us a lot of control over actually making things happen according to the user's actions and the user's behavior. So prerequisites for this video, you should be familiar with HTML select menus. You should also be familiar with document.query selector. And our learning objectives are that you'll first get your exposure here for the first time to actual event listeners. And we want you to be able to talk about what event listeners are in JavaScript. And also, students will change the values in the select menu and use an event listener to populate a variable used to keep track of the currently selected item. So basically what we mean is that if you have selected Egusi, but you've decided you really want Gomen, when you switch to Gomen, then the website should know that you've changed your mind before you actually add it to your cart. So we have a temporary variable that's holding the value until we commit to the cart. And the assignment is to make it. We want you to have an HTML document that has a field that keeps track of the currently selected item and that changes when the select menu changes. And all of this is happening due to event listeners. Okay, so let's get started. So what we're going to do is we're going to create, let's actually first start off by talking about event listeners in general. Let's go ahead and inside here and let's just create a button. And let's give the button an ID. And the ID will just be called BTN, and it just says click me. So inside of JavaScript, we'll go ahead and grab that element. So we'll say var BTN equals document dot get element, or we'll do document dot query selector pound BTN because it's an ID. And then we'll say BTN dot add event listener. So when you say add event listener is a method that is part of the DOM API and with JavaScript, and it takes two parameters. The first one is the type of event that you're listening for, which in this case is a click. And the second parameter is a function. Now, JavaScript can accept functions as arguments to methods. So this one is, the function is the second parameter that it accepts. So in this particular case, we have button.add event listener. The first parameter is a string, and the second parameter is a function. It starts with a curly brace, it ends with a curly brace, and then it ends with a parentheses. If you delete this last parenthesis, you'll see we get an error here. And it's saying, oh, end parenthesis is expected. Because this parenthesis here, it needs an ending. This one begins the parentheses, this ends the parentheses for accepting arguments in a function. We're not accepting any arguments. But this parenthesis here is not finished. So we have to put the end right here. All right, so when we click that button, we just want to do an alert. It says, we sell food. This is a test, so we can refresh this, and then we click me, and then it says we sell food. So that is an event listener. It's listening for the event. It's always waiting until you click, and when you click, then it responds. Okay? So that's a basic event listener on a button, but what we want to do is do an event listener on the change. And the way that we do that is we've already captured the change of the select menu item here. So we're going to go ahead and delete our button. And what we want is that when we do a change here, we want to see the change show up in our console. So what we can do is we can say the name of our, the ID is foods. You see ID is foods here. And we've already captured that by a variable called foods in our JavaScript file. So we can come down here and we can say foods.add event listener. And instead of click, it will be change. So on change, we want to give it a function. And this one we'll just do console.log I have changed my value. So this is the select menu. We're just doing this to see that the change works. So when we refresh the page here, I have changed my value. Then if we make another change, I have changed my value the second time, the third time, etc. Now Chrome, these are the Chrome developer tools that we see down here. How did I get there? I did Option Command J on a Mac or Option Control J on Windows, and you see your console. This is your JavaScript. These are Chrome developer tools. We are working inside of Chrome, Google Chrome web browser. So Google Chrome has a way of grouping, and many browsers group your console logs if they're all together. Instead of saying I have changed my value 4 different times, it takes up too much space. So we just put a number next to that value there. Okay? All right. So we've changed the value many times. So we see that this works, obviously, right? So instead of doing that, what we're going to do is we're going to get the values and the text that is of the selected menu item in your change menu, okay? In your select menu. And the way we're going to do this, there's many ways to do this. You can actually grab the events in the change with the parameter here. We're not going to do it that way. We're going to do it according to the tools that you're already familiar with. And one of the tools you're already familiar with is Query Selector. So let's just say var selected item equals document.query selector foods. And we've already selected food, so we know that we already have a query selector to select that. But what we're doing with this is we actually want to select out of our menu the option that has been checked. So we can just say option checked. So this will give us the information about what was checked, what was selected. And we can console log that out. We'll do selected item dot value. Just remember we've got a value here, and then this is the text, right? So for when it's changed, we declare a variable called selected item to capture this, and then we're going to select it. We're going to log it out here. So console.log selected item.value, and then we're going to console.log selected item.text, just to make sure that we have what we want, right? So we're going to select a dish here. Changu fish is right there. The value and the text. Eba, value and text. All right, so that's working. So what we want to do now is that we'll get rid of our button. We don't need that anymore. We want to create a variable to hold the selected, the user's current choice, because if they want to add it to a cart, we need to add that to the cart. And we also want to let them say, hey, we know what you selected. Can you check this, please? So we can make a value for that. We'll just say, we'll make an object, and we'll call this user selection equals, it will have a value, starts off with null, and a text. Starts off with null. We're saving what the user's current selection is. So what we can say is user selection dot value equals selected item dot value. And then our user selection dot text equals our selected item dot text. So it's the same thing that we had before, but now we're capturing it in this part here, right? And then the next thing that we want to do is we want to display it to the user. So we could say, after the select menu, we could have a div here. And then we can have a, we'll say, span. We can put a span here. And we'll give this an ID of, let's just make it selected as text. And then we'll make another span here for, with an ID equals S value. We're just making these short names here. Although, you know, there's a rule in programming that you should always have descriptive variable names. So we'll just say, we'll make it a little longer so it's more descriptive. S stands for selected. Or we could say user text, user selected. Let's do this. So this is a little long, but it's more descriptive. User selected value. All right. Long but descriptive. So user selected text and user selected value. These are two IDs. And the last span, we'll actually make a span in front of here. ID equals notification. Now, I'm not feeling too happy about these names, but it's good for now. So what happens is when they select one, this notification will have a notice like, hey, you've currently selected, and then like Chango fish, and then the price. All right. So when they change it, then what we're going to do here is that we're going to say display text equals document.query selector. User selected text. And display value is document.query selector user selected value. And then display text dot inner HTML equals user selection text user selection dot text and display value dot inner HTML equals user selection dot value. Now this was a long way to do it. There's a lot shorter ways to do this. But hopefully this can give you an idea of what we're doing here. And the other thing that we had here was a notice, right? We had a notification, so let's make one for that. Notification. Let's make these var for everything. And then document.query selector notification. And our notification, enter HTML equals, you have selected, and then these two get the text and the value. All right, so let's see if this works. Changu fish. All right, cannot set inner HTML of null, script.js line 40. So what do we have? Notification, document.query selector. Oh, of course, because these are all IDs. So user selected text, user selected value, and notification. User selected text, user selected value, and notification. Okay, so that should work now. Refresh. You have selected Egusi soup. Now, there's another one, script.js line 42. What did we do here? Display value. Document.query selector. User selected. So I was inconsistent in my naming conventions here. You got to be careful with that. Partly because I was not making up my mind about what the variable name should be. You have selected Mesterwat, and it's a price of 4. You selected Changu fish. You selected a goosey soup. Now notice if you hit this select a dish, you have selected select a dish and it's 0. So later we can we'll make this disabled so that you can't select that. But right now we're finished with our objectives for this. So this works. And what we'll be able to do in the next one, now that we're able to have a price and show the user what they've selected, we can actually have a button to add it to a cart. And then we'll be halfway done, because then the next thing is tallying up the price in the cart and then making things styled and look a little nicer. And then we'll have something that works on a basic level. So if you've made it this far, congratulations. If you haven't done direct DOM manipulation before, or you've never done it directly with JavaScript before, or maybe you've only used jQuery before and you've never used raw JavaScript. Maybe you've even used a JavaScript framework like React or Angular, but you haven't used raw JavaScript. The raw JavaScript is the core behind all JavaScript that is out there. These tools is the foundation of all of the advanced tools, and these are good foundational skills to have. So if you haven't seen this before and you're doing it, congratulations. You're doing a good job, and this is really critical skill building that you're doing right here. Okay, we'll see you in the next video. And make sure to do this on your own. Make sure that you have practice making something like this work. And we will catch up with you in the next clip.